Hello everybody and welcome to Game A Dayer. It is day 364 here on Game A Dayer. My name is Step and today it is a Sunday, which of course means it is a Sunday story time. And we are getting really close to the end of the year here. So today we are going to play World End ECONOMiCA, episode 1. From the author of Spice and Wolf, Isuna Hasakura, comes World End ECONOMiCA. This is the first episode out of three-part sci-fi economic thriller visual novel set on the moon. I'm eager to see what a sci-fi economic thriller is. This game has very positive reviews and is available on Steam for a whopping 75% off during the Steam winter sale. So, normally $13.99, but right now $3.49. So if you want to pick up your own copy, you can absolutely do that. But first, why not join us while we play it? I'm hoping that this will full screen. Got my water. I'm all ready to read. This is so weird. It's like, all right, config, full screen. There we go. And I will turn the music stuff down just a little bit. And good. X. Alright, let's start. In the past, people really believed there was a doorway to an alternate world on the dark side of the moon. This dark side could not be seen from Earth, and it was only a few decades ago that images were successfully taken of it. As Earth had been visited, mapped, and divested of all its mysteries and secrets, it was made painfully clear that there were no rabbits on the moon, no traces of aliens, and certainly no pieces of portals to alternate worlds. This was perhaps why the journey to the dark side of the moon through the vastness of space was so fascinating for me when my parents took me there as a kid. Mankind had never set foot upon any of the glittering stars that were arrayed before me. When I realized that, I felt a desire to leave my footprints where no one had gone before. It wasn't until after I learned more about the world that it dawned on me that what a foolhardy dream that was. Regardless, it was something that shook me to the core so much that I nearly wet my pants. I'm guessing that this is translated. Afterward, everything before me became a stepping stone in my mind toward my dream of setting foot where no one had gone before. I had no time to waste. If I didn't act now, then someone else would leave their footprints there first. Faster, faster, much faster. The population continued to grow, and time ruthlessly slipped away. Only a handful could be the vanguard of it all. Not a day went by where I didn't ponder what I could see. It would be a new frontier where familiar places, customs, and the past would not exist. A frontier where every small movement I made would become part of history. The footprints of the first humans on the moon could still be found preserved in the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall. Those footprints told uncountable tales. Footprints left in the sand measuring just shy of 30 inches. Even so, they were amazing footprints that sent shivers down my spine. So that's a city on the moon, eh? That's pretty cool. Do. I like this interface. It's Nifty. With a click, my mobile PC turned on. I awoke to the whirring of the hard drive. Since I had fallen asleep curled up in my chair while clutching my PC, it was difficult to get my body to move. My body felt so stiff, I was sure that a careless motion would break something. Even so, I rather enjoyed the sensation of slowly stretching out my limbs from this cramped position after waking up. It made me feel alive and truly let me know that I was awake. I willed my arms to move, then my legs. Although hardly efficient, this was how I chose to do things, and was what happened when I woke up every morning. It was a satisfying action, and one I never had a chance to savor before I left home. On top of the table, I had left a rather crude diode lamp on, and a coarse layer of fat had formed on the surface of the leftover coffee in my dirty cup. Beside my cup was a half-eaten chocolate bar, which I reached for and crammed into my mouth. I swallowed the unpleasantly sweet chunk as the PC finished booting up. At that moment, my brain went to work as I verified that I had my wallet, memory cards, and bag on me, and that none of it had been stolen while I was asleep. It appeared that I had survived the previous night. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. However, in order for me to survive today, I would have to make some money. It had been 3 months and 12 days. 3 months, 12 days since I had left home. That didn't really work. Telling myself that I wasn't just some well-to-do kid pretending to be a ruffian, I flipped open the organic display. A-I-B-I-C-I. I was staying in a cheap net cafe. You can stay in a net cafe? Cool. It was a good-for-nothing establishment that leached Wi-Fi from another shop, and its customers were of equally questionable quality. Hey kid, a fine morning, isn't it? As I left the booth to go wash my face, an unkept clerk greeted me as he played a game at the counter. Looks like a PSP. I figured he wasn't so much being friendly as much as he was making sure I knew he was watching me. The only entrance and exit were next to the counter, and off to the side on the wall were the words, "Everyone pays, no freeloaders." Even though this sad excuse for a building was built in a sewage canal, money was always collected. The only thing that concerned me when I left home was finding a place to sleep. Though I had some money, I couldn't really change my appearance. A fine morning. I'm not fond of your sarcasm, Earth Dog. The clerk's face twisted into a smile at my retort. Oh ho! It is unfortunate to not know what a real morning looks like, since the weather here's just a computer program. He said that lightly as he returned his gaze to his game. He seemed to be from Earth, though I wondered if he came to the moon as unskilled labor, got fired, and ended up here as an outcast of some sort. Why don't you head on back to Earth then? At my words, he turned briefly to glance at me and laughed sarcastically. Things are a bit better here than down there anyhow. That's how he responded. Moon scum. Without responding, I went to the washroom. Earth Dog, Moon scum. My name's Yoshiharu Kawara. Yoshiharu Kawara. I was born and raised in this lunar city, so I was genuine moon scum. I returned to my booth, entered my password, and booted up the tool application on my computer. A welcome screen, whose only good point is its friendliness, was followed by a merciless and desolate landscape, much akin to the surface of the moon. Countless lines of words flickered on the screen. I imagine it's the kind of effect you'd get if you took a picture of an undeveloped part of the moon's surface with a low-res camera. Huh. The screen showed a session of lunar stock exchange. I see. This was the kind of place for moon scum like me to make a living. I'll get rich without needing to break a sweat. I didn't have enough time to earn an honest living. I took a deep breath and went about business. Interesting. Downward revision from the first fiscal quarter of CK Bio. Possibility of an investigation into Emerald Industries over suspicions of collusion regarding inflation, the board of directors at the Lunar Central Bank. With one eye on that stream of news, I focused on managing 220 stocks, picking up those with large price fluctuations. For instance, if one stock had moved 10% on the previous day, and another had moved 1%, there was probably a high chance of the stock that moved 10% could move by 1% today. Seriously? Okay. I would trade it on that notion alone. Within a turbulent up and down movement of the price, I could extract some profit, which is what I occupied myself with between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. lunar time. Between those hours, the only things that went into my mouth were food that I could eat one-handed and drinks. To be honest, I'd be so engrossed in trading that breaks were uncommon. Even if I had the free time to take a break, I'd rather use it to look at my screen and track price fluctuations and do some trades. Alright, we're going to take a quick breather here to talk about how much this game's tone has shifted in just the few minutes we've been playing. I like it. I love that it's like, started out as like your standard issue typical reach for the stars kind of thing, and then went into your standard issue typical I'm waking up to a visual novel kind of thing, and then it went right into like Cowboy Bebop, and now we're back to like, I don't know, chiptunes and stock trading. This is interesting. All right, you've got me. After all, a difference of few minutes when making the call to buy or sell could easily mean the difference between gaining or losing 1 or 2%. Fair enough. My war chest was 72,000 mools. Moon dollars? 1% of that came out to 700 mools. A store clerk here would make 7 mools an hour at best. This was a place where a public school teacher's monthly starting salary was 1,200 mools. So I could make in a few minutes what they'd make in a month. All right, thank you for the context, because you know we don't know from mools. This is like yen? Apparently it's more like dollars. Of course, over the course of a day's trading, some people would win and others would lose, but I was on the winning streak of all streaks, and before I knew it, my seed money of 1,000 mools had ballooned into 72 times that. Nice. The one and only time I did honest hard labor in my life was to build that seed money. Since then, I'd just been building my assets through these trades. While the gains were a little less than what they used to be, the greater your assets grew, the faster they grew, so it didn't worry me. It'd be what they call a snowball effect. I'd never seen a snow before, but I'd seen videos of Earth before, and thus I was familiar with it. I had decided that I was going to make even more money and then live in the center of this lunar city. It's a place where tons of ridiculously smart people were gathered. It's said that 70% of the world's wealth was held by people here. I'd lived it up there, and then the back of my head was high on these kinds of delusions as I performed trade after trade like a man possessed. That's why it took me a while to notice. I finally did after I got smacked on the head. Yo, kid. I turned around to see what that clerk from before was standing in front of the booth's open door. What, you want money? Since when did this place become prepay? Or what, is it something else? Was making money not allowed here? What do you want? I'm busy. As I glared at him, the overly skinny, bleary-eyed clerk let out a tired sigh. That's your reply? I came to tell you that the police are on their way to gather up street urchins and... Before the clerk finished his sentence, my PC had been closed and thrown into my bag. Hey, wait! The employee grabbed my shoulders as I tried to push him aside and exit the booth. Though he was thin, he was still muscular, strong enough to remind you that he was an adult. Still, I always kept a set amount of money in my breast pocket for times like this. I grabbed it and thrust it into his hands. Keep the change. I put on my hat, shouldered my bag, and ran down a narrow corridor, wondering what was going on in the booth. A bunch of guys who looked like they'd just mumble useless replies to any police questioning peeked through the cracks of their booths, wondering if someone had been arrested. Run-on sentences, okay? We're running. After sliding past the dirty counter, I made it to the store's even filthier exit. The chipped-away paint and rust made this already cramped building feel even more claustrophobic. Man, I want to watch this anime. I ran straight down the hallway toward the open air. There were stairs if I turned left at the end of the hall, but I had never had any plans to use them in the first place. Parkour? Without a moment's hesitation, I kicked off the floor, jumping as high as I could. Passing over the concrete wall, my body flew over the street. Right, lower gravity. Because the cafe was on the 5th floor of the building, there was a heck of a view below me. I jumped towards the wall of the building opposite me, and then kicked off from that wall, aiming back toward the wall of the first building. Once the sole of my foot hit the pipe on the wall, I jumped straight up with all my strength and resolve. Human genes had been fine-tuned for living on Earth over millions of years, so with some weight training, anyone could perform feats like this on the moon, where gravity was lower. What you couldn't do was allow yourself to miss your daily training. Jumping from wall to wall, I quickly reached the 14th floor of the building next door. I guess my heart rate did go up a bit. I glanced down to see a pair of blue uniformed policemen looking bored as they tapped their batons on their shoulders and climbed the stairs. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a jog. I had a thing. It seemed that Clerk wasn't playing a prank on me when he gave me that tip. I already paid my thanks to him when I handed him that money, though. By now, he should probably have already used the change from it to kick back with a store-bought beer. For a moment, I opened up my bag in the hallway and flipped open my PC screen. I ran off in the middle of a trade, so my position hadn't changed. I should be able to get at least a weak wireless connection out here. If I were lucky, prices would have risen and I'd be home free, but usually at times like this, figures. After hanging my head in disappointment, I closed out my long losing positions and called it a day. Losing. Nobody likes losing. Nothing good could come from wandering around downtown in the middle of the day. After jumping from one building to the next, I decided to walk down a deserted hallway toward my favorite Chinese restaurant. It was the time of day that most people my age would be at school, so walking around carelessly would get you chased down by the cops before you knew it. Until you turned 18, the legal age here, it was mandatory that you belonged in some sort of educational institution. Some people would say that this was a good thing, while others grumbled something about government-funded programs. I fell into neither camp. My way of dealing with systems I didn't like was to quietly escape them, not to loudly criticize them. On that note, this area, with all of its complicated passages and extreme elevation changes, it's not odd to see the 7th floor of a building be next to the basement of another, was convenient for people like me. 7th floor of a building. Oh, I guess it's really craggy, jaggy, whatever. Not to mention that the overgrown vegetation here and there that acted as good cover. These plants weren't originally included in the city plans, but had leaked out of one of the many lunar laboratories where they were messing with their genes. Supposedly, genes had tons of factors that expressed themselves differently depending on the environment, so a lot of plants and animals started acting strangely as soon as they were brought to the moon. There were even people saying that life forms on Earth could have originated from outer space and brought to Earth via the moon. Some of these plants grew so well in the moon's inorganic matter that you might wonder if they'd been around here for a million years. Of course, it wasn't as if these plants were free from the laws of physics. Nitrogen and other nutrients for them were often brought over from Earth. So I hadn't heard about any worries that the surface of the moon would be taken over by the greener. This applied to more than just plants. As for the humans here, it didn't matter how many ultra-elite think tanks came to energize the lunar economy and its industries. Life here just wasn't sustainable without sending a lot of things over from Earth. According to the government statements, even if the orbital elevator were to stop moving today, there was currently enough biomass here to create an enclosed, recycling-based environment. In other words, we'd be able to eat food, crap it out, then use that crap to grow more food to eat, and so on. They'd be able to make a ton of electricity with solar panels while collecting direct sunlight to use as a super hot source of heat, so maybe they're right. I mean, people even say the Earth was in more danger environmentally, since they're still relying on oil and nuclear power. I didn't know who was right. Whatever the case, I had dreams, and if it meant making my dreams come true, I didn't care if I was on the Earth or the moon. Sorry, I'm getting yawny. Yawn. Oh. After all, my dream was to stand at the forefront of humanity. It'd be a place where you could only look forward and live by advancing onward. Who cared what happened to the world behind you? And if I couldn't make this dream come true, then there'd be no reason for me to live. That was why, to put it logically, I'd never worried a single bit about the moon's environment or whatever. What I worried about was how much money I made and how fast I reached my goals. While I was thinking about these things, I passed through a thickly vegetated tunnel toward high ground. It was a clear day, as it always was. On the other side of a translucent membrane, the visible half of the mist-covered Earth looked so small. The sky over the lunar city was wrapped in a see-through dome, and right beyond it was outer space. That didn't look that small. Gravity was weak on the moon, so you couldn't naturally keep large amounts of gases stored up on the surface. Also, while apparently each 24-hour day on Earth had a morning, afternoon, and night, which was followed the next day by another morning, the moon alternated between 2 weekdays and 2 weeknights. Why? Oh, naturally. Okay, yeah. However, the human body cycle was set differently, thanks to tens of thousands of years of living on Earth. Because most of the people living on the moon were immigrants from Earth, its dome was adjusted to give off light in an Earth-like way. It even had sprinklers attached to it so that it could rain. However, I'd only seen things like downpours and thunderstorms in videos. When it rained here, it was always just a drizzle. Strong wind never blew here. The only winds felt here were the slow, coiling movement of the atmosphere due to centrifugal and Coriolis forces, as well as the gentle breeze of the air inside the dome being mechanically circulated. I strayed from the streets onto a grass-covered cliff and jumped upward with a grunt. I kicked off a tree branch and rotated my body to land on the top of the tunnel. This was a box seat where you could look down on the greater parts of the city. I grabbed some beef jerky out of my bag and bit into it. According to the guys who came from Earth, this wasn't at all close to the real thing, but it was the only beef jerky I knew. There were a number of cities on the moon, and the one I lived in was the very first city to be created, and I could get a clear view of the whole thing from right here. It's a pretty cool looking city. The spot in front of me, where pointed skyscrapers sprung upward one after the other, was called Newton City. It wasn't like entry there was regulated, however, it had the feel of a special zone where only certain people could enter. Since it was full of giant corporate buildings, even public places like shopping malls and parks were overrun with police and city regulations. Most wealth here was created in Newton City, and you could find famous tycoons with assets worth over 10 billion mools all over the place. If you had that much wealth, you'd undoubtedly be able to be on the forefront of humanity when humanity took its next step. Money could make just about any desire you might have in this world come true. So it's not that you want the money, it's that he wants to be able to be influential and get out into the next place, like, I don't know, Mars. In this world, money ruled all. Like a photograph of the moment a drop of liquid hit a pool of water, a group of skyscrapers stood in the dead center of Newton City, while the buildings around that area were suddenly much shorter. That area was where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived. Where middle-class city... That area was where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived in was called Green City or the White Belt. That sentence. Ugh. It was a place full of people who loved words like high society and refinement. The kind of people who claimed to care about grace and harmony, but were really full of nothing but pride and obsessions with upward mobility. Whenever I went there, I felt sick seeing the sterilized rows of small, nicely manicured lawns and white-walled buildings. There wasn't a single piece of garbage on the street, and the only plants around were domesticated trees on the roadside. Well, everything had to be domesticated on the moon. It all had to be shipped in, right? After that, the buildings in the area around Green City got taller again, but it was a complete jumble. There, power lines dangled messily into the streets, and vulgar neon signs lit the area, painting the whole place with the feel of squalor. I see. The area was called the Outer Sections, and while technically they'd all been numbered from 1 to 8, there was no real point. I see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So not really drawn effectively. That's fine. If you considered Newton City the center of everything, the north was full of factories. There you could find silicon dioxide dissolution factories, fertilizer synthesis factories, automated plantations, and so on. On the east side was a village where I lived. That area was notorious for its hard-nosed residents. You could also find settlements of old-timers, whom you might call artisans in the area, which made for a countless number of small workshops. Most people didn't have the luxury of being able to do something like transport wooden furniture via orbital elevator, and land was expensive on the moon, so the houses in Green City were small. As a result, handmade furniture created with the size and shape of your house in mind was far more popular than ready-made furniture. That makes sense. I was told that my parents were aiming to live together with plants brought from Earth in exchange for making furniture out of wood. Even though factories existed that used the best scientific advances to maximize harvest rates as much as physically possible, they still grew plants by hand for some reason. They seemed to at least have their customers, but I didn't see a single enjoyable thing about being covered in dirt. It just made me wonder why they ever came to the moon in the first place. This wasn't a place for stuff like that. The moon was supposed to be a place where you directed your gaze to the top of the inorganic buildings that line Newton City. And if I shifted my eyes to the left, I saw an area haunted by those who couldn't keep up in that struggle. Here, the buildings started rusting. When buildings started rusting, no one ever bothered to repaint them. It had been nicknamed the Red Valley. The reason it was called a valley was because when Newton City was originally built on a flat crater floor, all the low-income earners made the Rocky Mountains surrounding the city their home. And by Rocky Mountains, I don't quite mean something like the harsh mountainous environments you might find on Earth. It was actually closer to what you might call highlands. As a result, the rock was chipped away to increase surface area, like a river eroding hills, and many structures could be built in a tight area by terracing the slopes. Furthermore, more space was secured by digging caves into the rocky stretches. It was clearly evident that doing this over and over made for a mess of a city. Not much more than a decade had passed since the city's establishment, and it had already become such a devilish haunt that you wouldn't blame the local government if they just threw up their hands and gave up. As for me, I liked the Red Valley, with its level of squalor. While it was true that the people living there could be called outcasts and failures, the place was irresponsible in a good way, and that put me at ease. Of course, I had no intention of becoming a 20% that lived there. And finally, the area around where I was right now was called the 6th Outer Section. It was not as degenerate as the Red Valley, but it was not quite as productive as the east side of town. This area didn't even have a nickname yet, and its lackadaisical aspects oozed out at every turn. While the buildings were dirty and worn out, it was dotted with small companies who dreamt of Newton City and the occasional decent-looking house, so it wasn't the worst place to live. I stood up, hopped back down to the street, and jogged off. Fresh moon, fresh store. Sprout. The road was paved with neatly shaven limestone rocks. It was chipped and cracked here and there, but no one ever tried to patch it. The rough dirt of the moon had piled up in its recesses. Waterways were occasionally visible, and in them you could see clear running water, as well as fish swimming. While hydrogen was available on the moon, there was no water, so since hydrogen had been synthesized into water, it was made sure that every drop remained circulating within the dome. The waterway's final destination was a giant water processing plant under Newton City. In other words, everything was designed to gather in the center of the mortar-shaped city, while its people, whether it's people, water, or wealth. From there, everything was disseminated outward. After crossing the intricate waterways and bridges, I passed through a narrow alley and reached my destination. It was called the Lunar Chinese Restaurant. It's run by a Chinese couple with a strong spirit of enterprise who emigrated to the moon. I could sit down here from early afternoon to whenever, and they wouldn't say a word. However, the elderly wife's health had been fading recently, and the woman who sometimes worked at the restaurant in their place was a bit of a pain. While I prayed that she wouldn't be there today, it was in vain, especially on an unlucky day already full of policemen and stock losses. Oh, she's cute. As I opened the frosted glass door, the woman, watching the television placed near the ceiling with her head resting in her arms, propped up on the counter, lowered her glance listlessly. They really need to work on their sentence structure. While I was overcome with the urge to just shut the door and go to another store, the woman raised her voice before I got the chance. Table for one. The kitchen was run by a silent, stubborn, elderly husband of the family, so he never showed any signs of affection. Of course, no reply came from the kitchen. Even so, it was too late to leave, so I entered the store with a heavy gait and set up camp in the corner seat. While mountains of hydrocarbons sat at the moon's poles, they still couldn't be used for luxuries such as making plastic. As a result, most of the store's equipment was made from either wood or iron. Both could be gathered on the moon, and were easily decomposable by microbes when thrown away. An iron cup was placed with a clang on my tattered wooden table, which was no doubt found in the dump somewhere. The woman, beaming, then poured me water from high up. The water seemed like it would splash out, but it all stayed in a now perfectly filled cup. You showed up, you delinquent. Crab omelette over fried rice. I made my order bluntly without a proper reply. The woman was about 20 years old and had bright, silky hair. She had been working there for a while and seemed to know a lot of the customers, so she probably lived in the area. One crab fried! The woman yelled cheerfully toward the kitchen. Then, of all the things she could have done, she sat down across from me. Except her body was off to the side and her vision was fixed on the TV. She seemed interested in some in some plot point in the drama she was watching. I heard that actor up there is in the area right now. He's going to negotiate his next title and bask in space at the same time. A beautiful actress from around here's accompanying him. I didn't ask, but she informed me anyway. I ended up glancing at the screen as I silently took my PC out of my bag. He's a little too handsome, though. While that might be true, I stifled the urge to reply with a "so what" as I placed my PC on the table and switched it on. The PC was loaded up with financial information and charts of historical prices for the 4,000 stocks on the Lunar Exchange. In order to make a profit tomorrow, I had to find my next target. Oh, want to use our power? I raised my glance after being asked the question, and found my eyes meeting the woman's. She had beautiful almond-shaped eyes that were even brighter in color than her hair. She must have led an easy life, I thought to myself. Nevertheless, it'd be helpful if I could use the restaurant's electricity. Even if I did decide to go back to that half-assed net cafe, the rates were cheaper at night. The problem was that my battery might not last until then. I silently took out my adapter and plugged it into the cord that the woman, still seated, had lazily dragged my way with her foot. As I hugged the ground in order to plunge my adapter into the outlet, the woman mischievously twitched her toes in her sandals. She likes you. Perv. That was what she said to me once I raised my head. But she wasn't even wearing a skirt. Naturally, I ignored it and booted up my PC. After that, the woman stopped messing with me, and the only sound in the restaurant were the filtered voices from the television and the swinging pots in the kitchen. This was a quiet area without much foot traffic, and it felt like time passed slowly here. The thing that made me go far out of my way to come here, other than the fact that they wouldn't report me to the cops, was this tranquility. What did you eat yesterday? Well, it was pretty tranquil until the woman suddenly asked me a question. What I had to eat yesterday have to do with you? I ignored her as I stared at my screen, but she wouldn't stop looking at me. Her face, visible from the corner of my eye, didn't make it look like she was particularly interested in the question, but she wouldn't turn away. Defeated, I raised my glance, and at that moment she grinned. Pasta. I answered, then turned back to my screen. I updated my data while I was in the cafe, so I searched for any corporate news that might affect the market in the next few days. From where? As I clicked my tongue, the woman's smile, as expected, disappeared. She didn't get mad or stand up, though. That doesn't suit you, you know. She said that so seriously that instead of getting mad, I ended up blushing. She treated me like a complete child. Big Bull Cafe. It was an arrogantly named place for an nearly illegal operation. You see, bulls were symbols of strong markets. For that reason, there are bronze bulls placed in front of the biggest financial districts in the world, like America's Wall Street or Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So for me, the place was good luck. Huh, so Saralt's handmade pasta. Saralt? Wasn't there a really skinny guy there? That guy owns the place. I was a little heartbroken at those words. I was sure that he was some loser who worked there by the hour, but to be the owner of a store, big or small, was a fine example of a capitalist. Not only that, I was heartbroken to hear that I was eating his pasta. I mean, it was good. I taught him how to make those. The woman beamed with pride. Wait, if she taught him, then where did they know each other from? Don't tell me they used to be lovers. As I dreamed up juicy scenarios in my head, I stared vacantly at her face, and she turned back to the television. So, was that lunch? Dinner? Huh? Did you eat that for lunch or dinner? I didn't have the slightest idea as to why she was asking all these details. It was probably because of some stupid made-for-women horoscope that she was watched every day. I bet it was something like, if you ask a boy to meet today, what and where he ate for each meal yesterday, your lucky color is yellow, and your lucky word is optimism. Dinner. What about lunch? I had set out to click my tongue, but after being told straight-faced that it didn't suit me, I ended up holding back. That woman might have noticed this fact because she was grinning slightly. I answered her after telling her in my mind to shut up. I didn't eat it. Really? This time, I didn't keep myself from clicking my tongue, or from getting angry for that matter. Why she wanted to know these things in such detail completely baffled me. And why do you care? Right as I turned her question around on her, a plate of fried rice hit the counter with a thud. The woman stood up and brought the plate over. Then, right as I thought that she was going to place it on the table, she kept the plate in her hand and looked down at me. You really didn't eat anything for lunch? As if to show her that I was trying my hardest not to click my tongue, I started to scrape my upper lip with my teeth. No, I didn't. I don't eat lunch on weekdays. What about today? Today is an exception since I was driven out of the cafe at a weird time. So what? So what? Anyway, give me my food that you're just holding there. Eating a proper lunch was something special to me, since I usually only did it on Sundays when the Lunar Stock Exchange was closed. Eating lunch on a weekday was rare. As I glared at the woman, she heaved a small sigh and placed the plate on the table, completely unperturbed. The smell of the sweet and sour sauce whetted my appetite. My intestines shifted from the now strangely annoying woman's question to the food in front of me. You need to eat 3 real meals a day. The woman talked to me while standing and staring at me, digging into the fried rice. And eat a little more neatly. Mind your own business, I muttered mentally as I piled a mountain of fried rice and crab omelet on my spoon and shoved it all in my mouth. The woman sighed and returned listlessly to her counterside chair. What a cryptic, stupid woman. I focused on my food, stuffing my stomach with such vigor that I barely had time to even sigh. Transition. After filling my stomach with fried rice, I ordered the ayu jelly, a sweet and sour gelatinous dish. It was unusual to see this dessert around here, but it was definitely delicious, if a little expensive. Since today was a cursed day, I thought that it might be just the exorcism I needed. You've got the money, right? The woman doubted me after I made my order, but of course I had enough money to have a regular meal. I could rent a cheap apartment for 400 mules a month, so I could live on my own pretty easily. The reason I actually couldn't was because there weren't any places a miner with no guarantor could rent. I heard that on Earth, people in my situation were sometimes able to make it happen. Unfortunately, lunar cities were only accessible via orbital elevator, and so everyone's identity was known. If I went to a rent house, they'd immediately run my fingerprints and an iris scan, and then contact my parents. Unless you were an extraterrestrial, if you're on the moon, they know who you are and where you came from. Have I ever stiffed you? Just because you've paid in the past doesn't mean that you're sure to pay next time. And anyway, you ran away from home, right? You need to take better care of your money. I felt a strange sense of comfort in the fact that her lecture wasn't about my running away itself, and overall, I agreed with the idea that people should take care of their money. You don't have to tell me that. Oh, really? The woman shrugged and then carried the IU jelly from the counter where it had just appeared. It was hard to argue with her, since I was, in fact, wasting money here, but I was confident that I had more money than anyone else my age. What's more, I'd never gone on a wild spending spree before. The magic compound interest made the world go round. If 1 rule today turned into 10 in a year, then 3 years from that, it'd be 1,000. Compare that to what my dad would make in his entire life, earning roughly the same amount every month from sweating in the field to grow vegetables. In 5 years, there'd be no way I'd be eating in a lame restaurant like this. That woman might be making fun of me now, but I'll bet I'd eventually be wearing a stylish suit and living in a high-rise apartment in Newton City. And, of course, I was not going to stop there. That wasn't where my dreams ended. It was where it began. If you're some rich actor, you might be able to bask in space on the opposite side of the moon with some beautiful woman at your side. But if you were one of the wealthiest here in this lunar city, you could go even further. You could make all the emotions and desires you feel when you look up at space come true. I ate the sweet and sour clump of IU jelly, and as I looked at my screen to choose the tree that would grow me money, I was immersed in a familiar daydream. This place was the forefront of humanity, a golden city of wealth and prosperity. I would run through the city's gates. I'd outwit the geniuses and prodigies from Earth and take my place there at last. I silently got myself worked up during this quiet early afternoon in a Chinese restaurant. I moved my touch mouse back and forth, and just as I brought up the display for the prominent, even on the moon, investment bank of E.J. Rochberg, customers entered the store. I thought it was strange that customers would come in at this hour, and I raised my head. At that moment, a feeling ran throughout my body like an ice cube had just been stuck up my asshole. Police. Welcome. 2, please. Yes, sir. Table for 2. That woman said with her usual carefree tone, but the words barely entered my ear. I lowered my cap even further down my eyes and hunched over, trying to hide in the reflection of my PC display. Looking at their clothes, it was unmistakable. The pair who had just arrived at the table on the other side of the restaurant were police officers on patrol. I'll get the tension done. Same here. Very well, 2 tensions. It seemed like they just chose this place randomly during their patrol. But who likes eating in the same restaurants as cops? Not only that, I think those 2 were the ones who were at the Big Bull Cafe, according to my faint memory. The patrol route for the police didn't include going into cafes, so someone had to have tipped them off somehow. I was not some sort of invisible man, so someone surely must have seen me hanging around a weird place at a weird time. Whoever that someone was, if they told the police that there was a shady-looking kid around, there'd only be a handful of places they'd search. It was totally possible that these two were looking for me. That might also be the reason that the policeman facing me was glancing at me now and then. But to think that he'd take off and lead us on a wild goose chase. The policeman with his back to me suddenly spoke up. The cop, looking at me, waited a moment before replying to his partner. Well, it was just some big shots looking at a map all day who decided how wide an area of jurisdiction has to be. And there wasn't any public survey system in that area either. But I think that if he were hiding somewhere, it would have been in that net joint. The storekeeper there was a pretty sketchy looking guy too. Maybe we should grab him and rough him up a little. Don't judge by appearances. He ended up having a pretty impressive history, didn't he? Yeah, I guess. Man, I should have studied harder at the academy. I never thought I'd be assigned to the boonies like this. Location has nothing to do with it. You just need to carry out your duties. You're very right about that. So they really were looking for someone. But the owner, that Serault guy, had an impressive history I couldn't even begin to imagine. What do we do after this? If we go by the book, we'd start the usual thing with questioning people. His co-worker, facing me, took a sip of his water and went quiet, as if in thought. I got the feeling that he was taking a good, hard look at me. In my mind, I was praying that they gave up on the questioning and just went back to their nest. If we call in for reinforcements, we're just going to get laughed at. Looks like we've got no choice. Anyway, our duty is to keep public order. Cracks in public safety begin with the smallest places. Even if it is just one boy, we can't just let him get away. My heart felt like it might jump right out of my mouth. Now, there was no mistake. They were tipped off by someone and were out looking for me. Lunar cities were nuts about keeping public order. Even in the Red Valley, there was where suspicious guys wandered around the streets. There was not even the faintest trace of any real danger. It was just a degenerate, pleasure-seeking town. Everyone knew just how risky committing an act of physical violence was in a place this small. After all, if you were deported by the residential management court, there'd be no question that you'd never be allowed to come back. The only people exempt from that form of punishment were people who were born on the moon. Even then, if you committed second-degree murder or worse, it was... didn't catch that. Of course, I wouldn't be subject to the penal code just because I ran away from home, but the overall zeal for maintaining public order would mean that I'd be sent back home. After that, I'd probably be forced to report to a local facility every day until I became an adult. While that happened, I'd grow further and further away from the front line of the world and would eventually be swallowed up by the masses. I fixed my darting eyes on my hands and thought desperately, how should I escape from here? If I grabbed my PC and ran, the plug would get in the way. Do I unplug the adapter from my PC, then take off running with just the unit? My identity could be given away by the adapter, but it was still better than being captured. Or should I stay still right here and wait for them to leave? I'd like to do that if it's possible, but that officer staring at me seemed like he was about to stand up and shout, "Hey you!" to me at any moment. My cold sweat dripped onto my keyboard. Wait, that woman wouldn't have ratted me out, would she? As I thought of this possibility, I was tortured by a desperate rage, but suddenly a shadow appeared on the table. It was that woman. More water? She poured me a refill. I cursed her in my heart, wishing that she wouldn't draw their attention toward me at a time like this. And my lurid face was totally flushed. But a piece of paper with words written on it was attached to the side of the cup she clinked down on the table. Get ready. I nearly raised my head, but the woman quickly left my table before I could make the mistake. I set my computer to mute and shut it down so they didn't notice that my OS was no longer running. I'll give up on the adapter. I quietly pulled the cord out of my main unit and confirmed the location of my bag. I already used the money I was keeping in my jacket pocket at the cafe, so I'll use what I had in my back pocket. There was a line on an old Earth Mafia movie that I saw at home that said that a $10 bill kept in your clothes was a business card to God. It certainly kept you well prepared. I quietly placed a 10-mool bill by my hand, perking up my ears and waiting for the right timing. The policeman had been staring at me non-stop. He was definitely suspicious of me. With a clang, the policeman started to get up. Tension up! At that very moment, the tension don was placed on the counter loudly. What's wrong? The cop called out to his partner, who was now halfway out of his seat. Is that the guy? Is it the guy behind me? Right after he said this, the woman's voice rang energetically throughout the room. Thanks for waiting. Here's your tension don. Yeah. The one with his back to me turned his attention back to the food. The other one who was looking at me, but because the woman was standing next to his corner seat, he was stuck in his seat and couldn't get out. Now was the moment. The woman looked at me. It was my only chance. I pulled my hat over my face, closed my PC with my head still down, grabbed it, and then shoved it into my bag. The payment's on the table. I said this as quietly as possible and left the 10-mool bill on the table. Hey, you, wait! The officer clearly told me to stop, but I just gave him a sideways glance as I walked quickly toward the exit. It was only a distance of 3 steps, but it felt like forever. The yelling officer attempted to chase after me, but with the woman in his way, he couldn't get out. Kya! The shrill scream came from the woman, who lost her balance after being pushed by the officer. She turned to the other officer, still sitting in his chair, and the piping hot tension don looked like it was about to spill. Acting out of natural self-defense, the officer caught the bowl in his hands. By that time, I had successfully exited the store. I took off running as if nothing else in the world mattered. And that, I'm afraid, is going to be where we stop. I wish we could get further into these games, but, there's only so... Oh, hey, there's a cat there. There's only so much we can do with, like, an hour of game a day, so... I don't know, we'll have to figure that out. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it the old thumbs up. Give this video some love. And if you do want to see the rest of World End Economica, Episode 1, then please give this video some love, and have your family, friends, pets, and loved ones all do the same, because as you are aware, if you watch this channel much, the first video on this channel to get 100 likes will get that game a full playthrough as a bonus video for the channel. Also, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, and when you do, don't forget to hit that dingy bell, because that will let you know when I upload new videos, which I do every single day. My name is Step. We have been playing World End ECONOMiCA episode 1 here today on Game and Air. Thanks so much for joining me for this Sunday story time, and please come back tomorrow when we'll be playing something for Mobile Monday. Thanks, everybody.